All right, guys, as promised, I'm back. I know that seemed like a lot on your introduction, but I promise it's going to set you up to really think about your paper. If you can answer some of those questions, like what was the impact your person had on the world? What contributions did they make? Is your person's product maybe your way of thinking everywhere? Then great. So really get to know your person. I can't say that enough. So I did write out the entire introduction that we came up with. So I put all this together, and this is what it looks like. But I did skip lines because I want you guys to do that when you write. So I ended up answering, what was polio and what are the effects of it. And so I researched it again, and this is the website that I used. And so I went ahead and said according to this website. So this is word for word, the first few sentences, because I'm giving credit to my source, just like if I had used a quote. All right, so here we go. According to sciencemuseum.org.uk, polio is an infectious disease that can cause spinal and respiratory paralysis, and children are especially vulnerable to it. And I put that in specifically because a lot of her work is specifically for children. It can be fatal or cause permanent physical disabilities, and again, splinting the bones afterwards and caring for them was major in her work. So that's just extra information. Fortunately, it has been eradicated in the US due to the tireless efforts from many doctors and scientists. Okay, so now I'm kind of connecting the two. And you want to do that. If you're going to have stats about how popular the thing your person invented or came up with, it's hard to be specific. Whatever you put here, you want to kind of connect it. Otherwise, it's going to be choppy. So fortunately, it's been eradicated in the US due to tireless efforts of many doctors and scientists. She's one of those doctors, right? The world was ravaged with the polio epidemic throughout the first part of the 1900s. So again, now if you notice, I changed that a little bit. I had the date here, but I went ahead and just kind of changed it because it flowed better. And again, your work is always going to change. We're always going to make it better. So it gives my reader some kind of frame of reference of what time period it was. Now that's all my blue, and it's just 3 sentences. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. That's all it is, 3 sentences. But you need to know maybe the void that your person's contribution filled, or the need for it, or even just the history around it. Okay. Otherwise, if you don't, or if they didn't make a big enough impact, you may want to consider switching. So when I get to the green now, I'm into so this is my background. I'm going to write that though. So I've already started my rough draft, kind of. I would put this onto the blank. Okay, I would put it here. And then here's the topic sentence, and then down here is the plan. All right, so Jean McNamara, and I changed this part too. A doctor who dedicated much of her life's work, so I'm connecting it to here. Do you guys see that? I'm not just going to be, here's this random person. I'm connecting her as one of the doctors that I aforementioned. A doctor who dedicated much of her life's work toward aiding those with this debilitating disease. So again, I'm doing that instead of saying polio again. And there's a date, contributed to the discovery that there was more than one strain of the virus and aided those rehabilitating from polio. This report, so that's my topic sentence. It's telling me her name and what she's known for. And for her, there was 2. For yours, it might just be 1. Here's my topics, my plan, and it goes on the next page. Make sure we can see it in the camera. This report will explain, that's a word you can change, the events that occurred in McNamara's formative years. So that's I'll use a pen, I gotta use this. That's going to be my next paragraph, okay? Her formative years. That's my second paragraph. Her education and training as a doctor. And I could even say her years, maybe educational years. That's my third paragraph as a doctor. That's the middle life. And then her years after her work toward finding a vaccine, including her accomplishments. Okay, so that's the fourth one. The fifth one obviously is your conclusion. Okay, and you're going to look at it much in the same way as you do your introduction. So please spend a lot of time on that. We would spend a whole class period, if not 2, on that. So please spend some time on that. But you don't need to do this. You're just going to put that here. Okay? So now I'm going to talk about the early life. So again, you're going to take notes. I'm going to use a pen this time. Hopefully I don't make any big mistakes. So this is our second paragraph. Sorry, I've got something on the desk. Early life. Hopefully you guys can see that. The pen's kind of thin. Okay. So you're going to use a transition. That's what it says to do. You can say, first of all, to begin, initially. And then your reason, detail, and fact is going to be that we're going to talk about the early life. We're not going to use those words. And then what was it like? So again, you have to have a good sense of what your person's early life was. This is probably the hardest part to find information on. Even on this person, she's a relatively modern character, but there wasn't a whole bunch about her early life. Now, there's plenty for a paragraph, but not quite enough to give me a sense specifically. So I'm going to be a little bit generic here, and if that's the case for you, you're welcome to follow. Okay, so early life. So you have to have a sentence for that. I'm gonna use to begin. Again, you can change that too. So to begin, comma after my transition. I'm gonna say McNamara's early years. Yeah, I'm gonna say early years. Let me tell you why. Because I just used formative years in the paragraph before. So I don't want to use it right away. Now, I may use it in the conclusion, but I'm not going to use it in the very next paragraph. Okay? And I'm not going to say childhood because I'm going to use that at the end of the sentence. Okay? So for her, I know who her parents were. I knew what jobs they had. I know what school she went to. I know she had a sister. I knew her parents were religious. But that's about it. I don't necessarily get a sense of if her parents truly cared for her, if they encouraged her, if she loved school. I think it's evident in the awards that she received that she liked learning. But I don't get, there are some biographies that I've read helping the kids last year where you could tell, you know, Einstein did not have supportive teachers. You guys probably know that. They told him he wouldn't amount to anything, and because he thought differently. I'm trying to think. I believe it was Galileo. His mom. I believe that she had remarried after she had him, and the stepfather did not like him, so he had a rough childhood. But I don't get an overall sense either way in this sense. So for her life was pretty typical, right? Like I just told you, sibling, parents, church. Her parents worked, and she went to school. Right, that's pretty typical. So that's exactly what I'm going to put. Her early years were typical and led to her love of learning. Okay. Another example that I came up with, so let me do or. I can use a different transition too, so we'll say first. And I can even take in her first name here. So I'm not always doing McNamara. Okay, so first, McNamara's childhood, let's see, was typical Oh, I'm sorry. I used that up there. I apologize. I have 2 sentences, and I was going back to the first one. Gene McNamara. So again, proofreading marks, getting rid of that. Gene McNamara had a normal childhood. There's where I use that word. And education. Does this describe your person? If so, you can use, some combination of this. Another word for childhood would be upbringing. You could say home life. Okay, school years. Okay, any of those mean the same thing. Okay, so please use your thesaurus. So that's how I would set up the first paragraph after my introduction. So then I would put when she was born, where she was born, her parents' names and their occupation, that she had a sister, and where she went to school, and then in her case, her parents moved, and that would go on the back. And that fills up my first paragraph. Okay, and that's about 4 or 5 sentences plus this one. All right, so let's move on to the next one. And you're going to do the same kind of idea, transition. But you have to know a general idea of what your person's middle years were like. Now here's my suggestion. I'm going to write this down on a Post-it so you guys can see it. We'll do a couple. Okay. It's a little secret, okay? You can wait to fill in the subtopic sentences. Oops, I did it again. Okay? If you say, you know what, Mrs. Henderson, you're right. I don't know what Kobe Bryant's middle life was like. That's okay. Research it. Fill these in. And then after you filled those in detail, oh, okay. Yeah, he struggled with this, but he had this. And so then you can go back and you can tell me what it was like. Okay, so when you get to that point, I'm just going to help you with it now, but that's fine. You can do all of the reds for each section and then go back after you do have a good feel. But just here's some examples. You're going to use a transition again, and because it's the second one, there's more choices. Okay. So, middle life over here. If you guys can see that. Okay. So we have in addition, or moreover, to continue. What else do we have? Secondly, second, or secondly. Any one of those is fine. Okay. Or you can sneak it in the sentence. For example, I don't know, I'll put it down here. Or in the next part of their life. So again, next, that's a transition, and it's a little bit more advanced when you kind of sneak it in. The person it isn't obvious they're reading your second point, but their brain tells them that it is because of that word. Okay. Now, the further we get down, the harder these are, because first, some of your topics of research, their middle life is maybe where they got their initial ideas of how to contribute to the world. For McNamara, World War I had been going on, and it had just finished. So that led to her working really hard in the field of medicine. Your person might have blossomed later in life, and they didn't get their big break until it was their later years. It kind of depends. So for her, this is going to be for her. But I'm going to give you some easy ways to kind of get around that for me to help you without knowing your person, okay? So in the next part of their life, we could say they, and you'd put their name. So I'm going to put quotes. Okay, they found their love for, okay, or for her, discovered. Okay, or became interested, or became, oops, a doctor, but it could be became interested, or worked tirelessly, worked diligently in the field of, okay, or for her, I could say the next part of her life, she focused on her education and her higher training. That would be her description for her. But if you're doing somebody that they didn't have an academic contribution to the world necessarily, that might not be their case. Okay, not everybody goes to college, and that's fine. So that's one example. Another example is the next part, or the years following their childhood, or we'll do that, years, or adolescence, depending where you cut it off, were marked by what? By academic endeavors, by sadness, by excitement. So you're just giving me kind of a summary description, because I'm going to read the specifics in your paragraph, but overall, was that next part of their life happy? Was it sad? And of course, I hate using simple words like that. Was it traumatic? Was it exciting? Was it filled with joy? Did they start their family maybe in that time? So what was it marked by? Or you could even say filled with opportunity to become the great athlete that they were. Okay, so you're giving me a little quick summary of what their middle life was like without necessarily giving me any details, because I'm going to read those, right? Okay. Oops, didn't mean to use that one. Okay. All right, so the later life, again, it gets a little bit harder as we go on, because for her, in her middle life is where she really helped with the research showing there was more than one virus, and the rehabilitation of the limbs of people. I mean, it was mostly their legs that they were unable to walk. If you guys can imagine the splints and the leg braces that Wilma Rudolph had in our reading book. That's the kind of work that she was working with. Okay, so later in life, later life. So again, you want to transition. I'm going to circle those transitions. You don't want to forget them. Okay, make sure we can see. All right, so you could do finally. You can do thirdly or third. What else did I put? To continue, because we are continuing. Or any other ones that you think of. Okay. For her, she had done the bulk of her research, done the bulk of things that she was famous for, and she just continued to be a doctor. It's kind of like the falling action if her story was fictional, like in Anne Frank, right? The big stuff, the climax had happened. She found that research. She was even given awards, which I'm going to put down here, but the equivalent of being knighted in England, she was given that in Australia, okay, for her contribution to the work in polio. So for her, I'll use this bottom one to continue. Oh, see, I'm not going to use that one. For me, just because, watch the word I'm going to use next. McNamara continued. I don't want to use to continue. She continued, right? That is repetitive. So we'll say thirdly, McNamara continued to, and I've gotten a sense of her, and I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more information that I can read about her, but she continued to devote herself to the care of others. This, you don't need to know this, but you guys know that a lot of Australia is, they call it the bush. It's wilderness, it's rural, it's, one doctor for hundreds of kilometers of space. And so she would, any children that came to her practice, she'd make sure that they went home with a hot meal. She worked overtime, just many, many hours to make sure that they were cared for. And she fed them out of her own pocket. So She devoted to continue to devote herself to the care of others. Okay, so that's what that whole paragraph for me is going to talk about, and then of course her death. And I was considering putting in there something about her death because she neglected her own care as she was caring for others, and she didn't notice the heart problem that she had. So I might go back and change that. Okay, so for you, is that where your person got their big break? Is that where they contribute to society? Or for them, was that their falling action as well? Did they, you know, help others that wanted to continue in their field? I don't know. So that might be a little bit harder for me just to give you the setup, but you kind of have some ideas, okay? All right, the conclusion is the next hardest part, but since we've kind of worked through your introduction, it's the same type of ideas, okay? Let me show you. All this good stuff we did here is very, very similar. Or I should say, all the good work, all the notes we did here is going to be very similar. Okay. I do not... and I don't want to be negative in the beginning of this. I do not want to get emails in a couple weeks. Oh, Mrs. Henderson, how do I do my conclusion again? I'm going to say, okay, well, go back and look at your notes that you took. And you're going to say, oh, I didn't take notes. So I'm going to send you the link of the video to this part so you can get extra, be reminded of what you need to do. Because this is hard. This is writing is challenging. And we could spend the entire year just writing. So your conclusion has 3 parts as well. Okay. The first thing that you're going to do is it has a transition word. So just like to sum up, in closing, and then you're going to restate your topic sentence, but in a new way. And your topic sentence is what your person was known for. Did they revolutionize the sport of or the industry of? Did they save lives? What did they do? But you can't use the exact words that you use. So let's see. I would do in closing, or in summation, or after much research might even be better. I'm going to put that one up there. After much research, put that in parentheses. Now, she earned this award. In England, you'd be a Sir if you were knighted. So she's called Dame Jean McNamara because that was an honor that she got for the work that she did. She earned it. Where did I put it? So I'm going to say that she saved lives through her tireless work and greatly improved. And I'm going to go ahead and use the word lives again. I don't think it's redundant here because of how dramatic it is. Improve the lives. And I could say and well-being of those who recovered from polio. Okay, I'm not going to say her work led to the discovery that there were more than one virus strain for polio, because I already said that specifically. So this is just kind of a summary of her work. If you had to walk away from your research and go tell somebody on the street while wearing a mask what your person did, then that's what this is going to be. What's the most important thing and the impact that they've had? So for your conclusion, these are some notes over here, because this is where, because now you have to reinvent the wheel. You came up with this fabulous introduction, right? And now you have to reinvent it in a new way. So please, please, please take notes. Think about, probably can't see that, trying to situate myself. Think about the impact your person made to the world. Not just their contribution, but the impact. What's happened after that? Think about the impact your person made, and not just to the world, but to maybe just their field. Okay, for example, James Naismith, his contribution, it did affect the world, but you know, it didn't affect the world of medicine necessarily. It didn't necessarily save lives, but it has definitely changed culture in the United States, I would say. Made to the world or their field again. Okay, so somebody's doing an African-American female, I can't remember her last name, I feel bad, but she invented hairstyling tools and products for African-American women, and so she was a pioneer in her field. Okay. Is there more evidence of that impact? Okay, for example, I could say there's only 4 countries left in the world that are afflicted by polio, whereas in the 1930s, it was all over the world. It was worldwide. Okay, so that's going to be the first one. That's the first part of it. Your second part of your conclusion is you're going to touch on the 4 topics. Okay, again, that's early life, middle life, sorry, it's somebody at the door, later life, and their accomplishments. Okay, so you don't want to necessarily say all those same things, but you could connect too. Let's say your person had a very difficult upbringing or childhood. You could say, even though, I don't want to, we'll say John Smith, even though John Smith's early life was marked by poverty and illiteracy, he worked hard and got a college degree during his college time. So you can connect the two. You can talk about how the events in the middle life led to accomplishments in the later life. So you can connect them, but you do want to touch on something that happened in each one. And I can get more into that once you guys research your topics a little bit more. For the accomplishments, do you think that they received the recognition they deserved? There are some, I'm trying to think of who it was from last year, where they never, even though they did all this work, either somebody had stolen the work or they were just never recognized for it. If you were doing the Wright brothers, you could definitely mention that, you know, the U.S. government just ignored their work that they did. They had to go elsewhere to get patents for their models. So you can talk about maybe the caliber or the type of accomplishments they got. And again, if there's somebody, you know, in the 1600s, 1700s, there might not have been that type of recognition. Okay. And the third part, and don't let it escape your attention, because we just did this. We did the restate the topic sentence in a new way, touch on the 4 topics. On the back is your concluding wrap it up sentence. This is going to be where you get to put in your observations, maybe your feelings, but not personally. You're not going to say I or me, but you're going to talk about their impact on the world. Okay, so that third one, we'll put wrap it up. I would like to start with some kind of word like overall or ultimately. I'm not spelling that right, so I apologize. But I want to get this video done for you guys. You've had to watch a 30-minute one plus this one. So ultimately, so you're going to give me some final thoughts. What has this person done for the world? Is it something that's touched your life, perhaps? Did they inspire others to continue going on with what they started? Okay, like Einstein's theory of relativity, a lot of his work is the basis for scientific textbooks and studies. His was the starting point for much of the science we have today. Did they inspire others to keep inventing or innovating? Trying to think of an example for that. Henry Ford, someone did him last year. Obviously, he gave us the groundwork for a functioning vehicle, and also the assembly line. And so now, obviously, that has been reinvented and re-innovated, but he gave us the blueprint for that. So that's another example of that. And this doesn't have to be something you write about, but it would fit for some of yours. Are they a role model for someone to follow? I think that Jean McNamara is. I mean, she worked tirelessly, many hours, her time, and she had a heart for children especially. So I definitely think that she is. What would the world be like without their contribution? Without their contribution. Okay, so just think of their impact on the world, what they mean to the world. And this is a deep kind of a reflection on what you've learned. It's not something to be frivolous. Because some of your people that I've said yes to are pop culture figures, so, and not maybe as serious as a polio doctor, right? So just treat it with respect, your overall thoughts, but again, you're not putting in, do not use, I really respect this person, or he's meant a lot to me, okay? You can say that they are a role model for young people to follow. They have impacted the lives of many. Every household in America has a basketball. I mean, you can connect it to yourself, but don't use I or me. Biographers don't do that necessarily. All right. So those are the hard bits of your paper. You guys can do the rest. The rest is just filling in the events of the early life, filling in the events of the middle life. That's the easy part. So if I can leave with you a couple of notes.